Good morning and welcome to our next Take 30. So today's Take 30 is on design sprints. So it's all about, design sprints are all about reducing risk and driving adoption for your analytics projects and endeavors. So the agenda today would be an intro of the idea of design thinking, experience design, and design sprints. Why experience design matters. Walking through our approach to design sprints, and then some tips on how to be successful. Okay, so my name is Scott Masage. I'm the practice director for BI here at Ironside. I've been here for over 8 years. In the past, I've worked internally at Cognos and managed both our Cognos BI portal and a development team. And I did the same thing at IBM prior to joining Ironside. So before we start off here, first I wanted to thank you all for your engagement in 2020. The Take 30 process has been a great experience for all of us. I hope also for you. We are looking forward to next year, and we certainly wish you a safe and happy holiday season. With regard to the Take 30s, they're going to return in mid-January, probably on the 14th or thereabouts. And we invite you to use the questions feature of GoToWebinar or email us at heretohelp@ironsidegroup.com to suggest any future topics of interest. Thank you for that. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is talk about the importance of design, and specifically for the knowledge worker. According to research, 30% of the workday is spent searching for information that helps that knowledge worker make decisions and meet their goals. And I'm sure that you all agree that another large percentage of their workday is spent aligning the information they find to the context in which decision making needs to be made, or needs to be done. Right, so again, there's a lot of time and effort spent trying to find the information, and design can help that quite a lot. So let's first introduce a few concepts. So the first is design thinking. So design thinking is the cognitive, strategic, and practical processes by which design concepts are developed. You see a lot of this in other industries such as consumer packaged goods, software development, things of that nature. It's been, maybe it's been around for 10 years now. The second concept is experience design, and this is where we kind of put our flavor into it. So experience design to us is the practice of observing and then improving the ways that people reach their analytic goals through design thinking. Okay. So experience design, or as we like to refer to it, EXD, really straddles three worlds. It lives at the intersection of business, users, and technology. All right, so experience design brings these perspectives together. We use experience design to maximize a technology's potential to solve user problems and also satisfy business goals. It's important to consider all of these contexts, or else it's difficult to be successful. So, if we think about prioritizing these three perspectives, from our point of view, user needs come first. Users are rarely involved in decisions and often have no voice, so we need to advocate for them. Business goals, while they often align with user goals, there's often an additional set of needs that a business needs to fulfill beyond user goals. And then lastly, it's important to think about technology in that it holds possibilities, but it also has constraints. So in a perfect world, we pick the right BI or analytics tool for every job, but reality often constrains that choice. So for example, we may be launching into an effort to build a dashboard and Power BI might have exactly the right feature we need, but we work in an organization where Tableau is our enterprise analytics tool, right? So technology can sometimes be constraining, and we don't always have a full set of choices. Okay, so next I want to talk about why experience design matters. So, number one, you are not your user. Self-design only works if our audience is us or exactly like us. There have been, in my 21-year analytics career, I've lost track of the amount of times that we run into situations where the requester of a report or a dashboard, or the person suggesting the need for one, purports to know exactly what the users need. So go build this thing, but then when you deliver, historically, when we've delivered that dashboard or the report, we often find that the target wasn't the true target, right? The actual need was different, right? And that's what got us thinking about design thinking and experience design probably 4 years ago now. So really, we need to understand the way that our users think, the things that drive them, the things that frustrate them, their habits and their background, right? And collectively, that concept is known as empathy. So empathy is critical for experience design. So another item is that experience design breaks down silos. So as we all know, good design is actually not the default. Organizations like Apple and Tableau put tremendous effort into making sure that their design of their products is absolutely right. So again, good design is not the default, and it doesn't happen on its own. To think about it, if you will, it takes an orchestra of players to create a seamless experience for a user. And when we think about our organization, are we sure that everyone in that orchestra is playing the same tune? All right, so I'm sure everyone can relate to this diagram. So the idea here is that upfront design reduces risk and cost. And what this diagram is showing is that, in the beginning of a project, we have lots of design possibilities and the requirements phase. And over time, those get reduced down, but also over that time, the cost of change goes up. So when we are working with concepts, change is free. When we were working with wireframes and block frames, change is cheap. But when you realize that you need to make a change after you've already built the thing and put it into production, change can be incredibly expensive and also incredibly destructive, right? It can be a real impact to the business processes that this analytic solution was built to support. So it's really critical that you ensure your design is right as soon as you can. Okay, so now I want to introduce the concept of the design sprint. Design sprints were introduced through Google Ventures. So this book called Sprint was written by Jake Knapp, who was a part of Google Ventures. This came out probably 4 or 5 years ago. So what is a design sprint? It's a time-constrained, phased process that uses design thinking to reduce the risk when bringing a new product, service, or feature to market. And the book walks through a couple of different examples. One is a coffee company that helps you understand how to go through the process and what the value is, what the pitfalls are, and how to do it right. So we like to consider design sprints in the context of this diagram, which is known as the double diamond diagram, which is just seems to be part of the design thinking ethos. So we start with developing a problem statement or hypothesis. Problem statements typically take the form of, how might we help the user accomplish a specific action while providing the support and information needed. So from there, we start the discover phase. And here's where we are attempting to find the right problem to solve. We gather as much information as possible by listening to users' insights and stories, and capturing what we hear is the primary activity of this phase. From there, we converge, and you'll notice that this double diamond diverges and converges, and then diverges and converges once more, and it's a pattern. So from there, we converge. After we've discovered, we identify themes, patterns, and commonalities, which can help us identify personas and revise the problem statement to, again, make sure that we are understanding and defining the right problem to solve. Once we have solidified the problem statement, which we can also consider to be the design goal, we enter the design phase, where we diverge once again. So this starts with brainstorming and feature prioritization, and the development of low fidelity wireframes, block frames, and prototypes. And really, this can be as simple as pen on paper, whiteboard, or in today's age, electronic whiteboards. And we Ironside, right, as we go through this process, we make sure that we've got a BI tool expert, one of our consultants, involved to ensure alignment between the conceptual design and the features of the BI tool, right? So one of the things that can be problematic is the identification of a need for a certain feature set, and it turns out that the tool being used doesn't meet that. So we'd rather know that, we'd rather understand those gaps during the process here, so we can iterate and find a way to solve for that. So once we have a solid initial design, we then iterate again and test to get to that final prototype. Okay. Okay. So our typical design sprint works like this. So this is an example that we've used in the past. So although the design sprint book calls out a five-day event, in working with organizations, we've found that spreading this out over 2 weeks is much more of an optimal thing, because it's tough to get people's 100% attention for 5 days in a row. So again, generally 2 weeks overall. It starts with a 3-day, it starts with really a phase 0 where we're reaching out and surveying and making sure that we've got the right stakeholders and everyone understands what the goals of the design sprint are. And we start again with a 3-day on-site workshop with 5 to 8 participants. Remote is an option, and certainly, and now as of late, it's a necessity. We'll talk a little bit about that later. So during those 3 days on site, we focus on goals and exploring workflows around a specific process and gather pain points and use cases. Another important feature of the on-site portion is checking in with subject matter experts through something we call expert interviews to validate and gain a deeper understanding of these use cases and workflows, right? So this is, you may, your group, the sprint, the core team, if you will, might be comprised of decision makers, but it's important to get the feedback of people who are kind of in the trenches, doing the thing, or have the kind of institutional knowledge about the data source, the process, whatever. So again, the expert interview is a key part of this process. So as we go through this, we develop proto-personas. We, again, collect all those use cases, then we prioritize them, right? Which ones are most important? And then we lay out a design roadmap and begin to think about testing, right? Who are the testers? What's our testing plan? How's that going to go? Okay. We then engage in iterative design brainstorming, and we think about things like context, right? What are the right dimensions to think about this data in the context of? what should the priority of what we show on the dashboard be? What goes in the top left, what's most important, what else can be put on the dashboard, and where should it go? Which gets into placement. And then we have to choose visualizations, right? What is the appropriate visualization to convey this message? And going through this process, it's important to consider that simple is best, right? You may be working with a tool that offers some really sophisticated visualizations, but those visualizations may not be germane to the data set, or while fantastic visually, are really hard for users to consume, right? Now we find those things out. We may find those things out in testing, but to the degree that which we can make those, we can use our experience to guide the process around things like that. We will do that. So again, in this phase, we are leveraging things like block frames and wireframes to mature the design process. So block frames are interesting. So they're really all about placement. And when we're building a block frame, it's not about data. We're simply saying, okay, we're going to show this piece of information, this metric in this portion of the dashboard. There is no visualization is present, no data is showing. It's simply, where does it go? And that's usually our first pass, so we can get, we can make design decisions about placement right up front. And then finally, again, we're iterating here. We are developing a more high fidelity prototype. So the first phase is the block framing, and then we're beginning to put the visualization types and where do the controls live. Should there be any logos, things of that nature. We're not dealing with colors yet. We're not dealing with numbers yet, right? Because those things can tend to get somewhat contentious. When people see data, they instantly begin to say, is that data right? Are those numbers right? And that can really that can put pressure, derailing pressure onto the design sprint. So again, block frames, then low fidelity wireframes that are again just showing the visualization type, not the numbers, and then walking through it that way. And then again, iteratively testing is critically important here, as is, and this is where we're going to get feedback from the user community, or sorry, feedback from the tester community, and then adjust the design to make sure that we're winding up with the right design and then moving to prototype. Okay, so what do design sprints look like? These are some examples of design sprint activities that we have engaged in the past. So as we go kind of clockwise here, the first is where we map, this is our experience mapping exercise, where we're talking about a business process or a kind of how we get to a goal, how we get to understanding around a goal, and just mapping it out with the core team. Interactively on a whiteboard. And again, from a remote perspective, there are remote whiteboard tools, collaboration tools that allow this to happen. And then we begin to collect the use. We canvas the core team to come up with the use cases that align to the experience map. And so each of them individually is putting together their use cases. And then there's a voting and prioritization exercise to bubble the most important ones to the top. And then we get into concept showcase. So this is where we are, we're hearing things, and then we're kind of testing out design concepts. Things like controls, things like placement. And again, we're doing it on paper. So if it's no good, we just tear off the sheet and start working on a new sheet, right? So again, the cost of this is infinitely low. And then as we get around to prototyping, again, that's the final phase where we're walking through iterating and testing. Okay. So, some keys and tips how to be successful. And some of this comes from the recent remote design sprint sessions that we have done. that have been successful. Really, we've all been forced into new modes of working this year, and we have found that we can be just as effective remotely as in person. So the first one is participation equals success. Success correlates with a high level of audience participation in the sessions, be they in person or in web conference sessions, right? I mean, certainly it's a little bit more challenging over the web. Also, participation in testing, feedback, and sign-off, right? You want an engaged team. That is what's going to help lead you to success. Frequent demos to drive engagement and improve outcomes. So frequent demos, frequent demos are going to drive engagement of the core team and related parties, hands-on testing of the prototypes. This is all of these activities are going to drive a better outcome. Validate the design from a technical perspective, right? Again, I gave an example of that before, right? You don't want to you don't want to come up with this great conceptual design that can't be built into the tool that you have, right? So it's important to have the technical voice in that conversation to ensure that the thing can be done, or find a way, maybe we can come up with an 80% solution for the feature need just by thinking about it. Okay. So real data is both good and bad. Talked about block frames. So again, while it may seem that having samples of real data and putting them into the tool, into your prototypes, understand that there's an opportunity there for people to kind of become data skeptics and waste time in what is a very accelerated process, questioning the numbers, right? Some people just get hooked on it, especially if it's their number, right? Instead, ask them to focus on design, how intuitive the solution is, and functionality, right? And again, that's where block frames are helpful, because block frames and low fidelity wireframes, where there's no numbers, right? So there's no argument to be had. It's all about placement and visualization. Next one is iterate. Iteration is key to this, but plan ahead for a certain number of iterations. I guess our suggestion would be do at least 2 or 3 design iterations, but not more than 5, right? You want this to have an end, but you also want to set the expectation with the core team and the user community that there is an end. Expect some changes as you move from final design to prototype, right? This always happens, but we do our best to get the design right and avoid them. Again, that's why iteration is key. Again, a change in a prototype carries much less technical debt than it changes in a BI tool through the development and release process. Record your sessions, right? So this is important. You may find that you miss something. You may find that people on the team miss something, right? So you give them the opportunity to review what went down. And then finally, post-sprint, track user activity to validate and encourage engagement, right? So, again, by the time you get towards the end of this sprint, there might be people who are kind of falling off in their attention, right? The day job is always calling. So by tracking the user activity through auditing, you can keep everyone honest and point that out. And really pushing the hands-on involvement is critical, because that ensures that they stay engaged. And ultimately, this process is around engaging the users and understanding what their actual needs are, and they're part of the solution. So as it goes into production, they need to own both the design and the solution. Okay, so that is the end of my content. And so now we can, I guess, Debbie, perhaps you can see if there's any questions.
Yeah, then please enter some questions into the question window if you have anything else that you'd like Scott to comment on. We do have one initial question though. What is the optimal number of people to have in a design sprint?
Right, right. So on one of my slides, I think I said 5 to 8 people. Certainly you want to get a cross section of the community related to the process, the business process, and that is going to use the solution you are trying to develop and design. So again, you want to make sure you have the right voices in the room, but you also need to have those who are willing to make the commitment and to be on board. Again, in our experience, you want more than 5, but really no more than 8. If you go beyond 8, it just becomes more challenging to get things done and get through the design sprint successfully.
Thanks. Earlier on in your slides, you mentioned that although it's ideal to have design sprints done in person, that in fact you can do them remotely. Can you comment a little more on that?
Yeah. So I touched on that a little bit earlier, and it's a great question, especially these days. So absolutely, you can do one remotely. We've been successful. I think this one was, mid to late summer that we went through it. Considerations from a technical perspective were the use of cloud-based whiteboarding tools. Certainly Google Slides, although a presentation tool actually works well as a whiteboard tool. There are cloud-based wireframing and prototyping tools such as Figma that allow for levels of interaction, the ability to provide commentary from multiple folks. So tools like that are extremely helpful in making remote sessions successful. And certainly, of course, it almost goes without saying, web conferencing applications like Google Meet, GoToMeeting, Zoom, what have you. Good, very good question though.
Terrific. And we have one last question at this point, which is, how do you manage situations where certain stakeholders and perhaps senior ones sort of have a louder voice or pulling seniority, and you're trying to really get the input from everybody on the stakeholder team?
Right. Okay. That's another good question. So very often these design sprints are, an organization involves itself in a design sprint on the kind of recommendation or impetus of a stakeholder. And the situation you called out, we sometimes refer to as the loudest voice in the room, right? Now there's also the opposite issue, and that is sort of the quietest voice in the room, right? So you want to make sure you have participation from all, but you also want to make sure that there's collaboration, and we're exiting the process with a design that everyone can support, right? Everyone agrees with. The ways that we help, ways that you can sort of help reduce the impact of this phenomenon is to ensure that during the workshop, as you go through the exercises, so such as the use case generation, such as the voting, and the prioritization, it's really important to balance those as both group activities but individual activities, right? And by balancing like that, you can begin to move past that loudest voice, the quietest voice, right? It's the kind of a democracy idea. Contrasting viewpoints are okay because they often result in a better design outcome versus a situation where everybody thinks it's great from the beginning, right? If there's no pushback, if there's no contrasting viewpoints, you might wind up with an outcome that isn't as good as it could have been.
Thank you. We have no additional questions.
Okay, great. Well, again, thank you all for your engagement this year. We're glad to have you, and we wish you a safe and happy holiday season upcoming, and we'll see you next year. So thank you very much.
Thank you.